For millions of years, every species in the galaxy accepted reality as it was. The Kritha accepted that strength ruled. They built their society around power. The strong conquered. The weak submitted. That was reality. They never questioned it. The Xylos accepted that logic ruled. They built their society around knowledge. The smart led. The ignorant followed. That was reality. They never questioned it. The Vel accepted that time ruled. They built their society around patience. The old decided. The young waited. That was reality. They never questioned it. The Orathai accepted that change ruled. They built their society around adaptation. The flexible survived. The rigid died. That was reality. They never questioned it. Every species adapted. Every species survived. Every species accepted. That was the way of the galaxy. That was the law. That was reality. Then humans arrived. The council watched humans from a distance. They expected humans to accept reality like everyone else. They expected humans to adapt, to survive, to fit in. They were wrong. Humans looked at reality and said, "This could be better." They looked at hunger. Other species accepted hunger as a fact of life. When food was scarce, they starved. They died. That was reality. Humans looked at hunger and grew food in deserts. They found water underground. They built greenhouses in frozen wastelands. They turned sand into soil. They did not accept hunger. They changed it. They looked at disease. Other species accepted sickness as a fact of life. When plagues came, they died. The strong survived. That was reality. Humans looked at disease and made medicine from mold. They studied the smallest parts of life. They created vaccines. They cured the incurable. They did not accept sickness. They changed it. They looked at distance. Other species accepted that some places were too far to reach. That was reality. Humans looked at distance and built machines that flew. They crossed oceans. They climbed mountains. They traveled to the moon. They reached for the stars. They did not accept distance. They changed it. They looked at death. Other species accepted that life ended. That was reality. Humans looked at death and fought it. They invented medicine to extend life. They invented machines to help hearts beat. They invented ways to bring people back from the edge. They did not accept death. They delayed it. They denied it. They defied it. The other species were confused. "Why do you not accept reality?" they asked. A human woman looked at them. Her name was Elena. She was old. Her hair was white. Her hands were rough. She had spent her life growing food in poor soil. She had spent her life changing her little corner of reality. "Why would we?" she said. "Reality is just the starting point. We are not finished yet." The council did not understand. They had spent millions of years accepting reality. They had never considered changing it. They had never considered that reality might be incomplete, that it might be improved, that it might be shaped by those who lived in it. "But reality is fixed," said a Kritha representative. "It is the same for everyone. You cannot change it." Elena shook her head. "Reality is not fixed. It is a river. It flows. It changes. You can let it carry you, or you can swim. You can build a boat. You can build a dam. You can change its course. Reality is not a prison. It is a possibility." The Xylos representative struggled. "But the laws of physics are fixed. You cannot change gravity. You cannot change time. You cannot change the speed of light." Elena nodded. "That is true. Some things cannot be changed. But many things can. Hunger can be changed. Disease can be changed. Distance can be changed. Death can be postponed. These are not laws of physics. These are problems. And problems have solutions. Humans find solutions. That is what we do. That is who we are." The Vel representative spoke. "You are young. Your species is young. You think everything is possible. You will learn. Reality will teach you. It will humble you. It will break you." Elena smiled. "Maybe. But not today. Today we cure disease. Today we fly to the moon. Today we change reality. Tomorrow we will try to change more. We will fail. We will learn. We will try again. That is our way. We do not accept reality. We improve it." The Orathai representative was silent. She had spent her life adapting to reality, changing herself to fit the world. She had never considered changing the world to fit her. She had never considered that the world might be wrong, that she might be right, that reality might need improvement. "Teach me," she said. Elena looked at her. "Come to Earth. Sit in my garden. Eat my bread. Drink my tea. I will teach you. Not how to adapt. How to change. Not how to accept. How to improve. Not how to survive. How to live. The Orathai representative went to Earth. She watched the seeds grow. She watched the flowers bloom. She watched the vegetables ripen. How do you make things grow? She asked. Elena shrugged. I do not make them grow. I create the conditions for growth. I prepare the soil. I plant the seeds. I water them. I give them sun. Then I wait. The plants do the rest. I do not change reality. I create the conditions for reality to change itself. The Orathai representative stayed for a year. She learned to plant gardens, to build wells, to make medicine, to build machines. She learned to change reality, not by force, by patience, by persistence, by love. She returned to the council. She stood before the representatives. I have learned something, she said. Humans do not accept reality. They improve it, not by magic, by work, by hope, by refusing to give up. They are not stronger than us, not smarter, not faster, just more stubborn, just more hopeful, just more human. The council was silent. They had spent millions of years accepting reality. They had never considered improving it. They had never considered that reality might be incomplete, that it might be waiting for someone to finish it. The council created a new category. Not adapters, not preservers, not thinkers. And that, the council finally understood, was the only thing that had ever improved reality. The only thing that ever would. The only thing that mattered. The only thing that was real. The only thing that was human. And that was enough. That was everything. That was the new reality. A reality that was not finished. A reality that was becoming. A reality that was human. The council tested humans. They wanted to see how humans responded to limits. Every other species had limits. The Kritha could not survive without food. The Xylos could not survive without data. The Vel could not survive without time. The Orathai could not survive without change. Limits were reality. Limits were unchangeable. The council wanted to see if humans understood this. They put humans in a desert. No water. No food. No shelter. The sun was brutal. The sand was endless. The council expected humans to die or adapt. Adapting meant changing themselves. Growing thicker skin. Learning to need less water. Becoming desert creatures. That was what every species did. That was the law. That was reality. The humans did not adapt. They looked at the desert. They did not try to change themselves. They tried to change the desert. They dug into the sand. They found water underground. Not much, but enough. They built wells. They collected every drop. They did not adapt to thirst. They found water. The council watched. This is not adaptation, they said. They are not changing themselves. They are changing their environment. The humans kept working. They found plants that could survive in the desert. Plants that stored water in their leaves. Plants that had deep roots. The humans learned from the plants. They did not become plants. They did not grow thick leaves. They used the plants. They ate the leaves. They drank the water. They planted seeds. They grew more plants. The council was confused. They are not adapting, they said. They are using tools. They are using plants. They are changing the world around them. The humans built shelters. Not from their own bodies. From rocks and sand and cloth. They created shade. They blocked the sun. They did not become heat resistant. They made the heat less deadly. They did not adapt to the desert. They made the desert less deadly. The council sent a scientist to observe. Her name was Lyra. She was Orathai. She had spent her life studying adaptation. She knew how species changed themselves to fit their environments. She had never seen a species that changed its environment to fit itself. She watched the humans. They built a garden. In the desert. They brought soil from elsewhere. They brought seeds from elsewhere. They brought water from underground. They created a patch of green in the middle of the sand. The plants grew. The humans ate. They did not adapt. They transformed. Lyra approached a human woman. The woman was old. Her hair was white. Her hands were rough. Her name was Elena. You are not adapting, Lyra said. Every species adapts. It is the law of survival. You change yourself to fit the world. You are changing the world to fit you. That is not adaptation. That is something else. Elena looked up from her garden. She was planting seeds. What is it called? She asked. Lyra thought. She did not have a word for it. No species did this. No species changed the world. They changed themselves. That was the law. That was reality. I do not know, she admitted. Elena smiled. Then we will call it human. We do not accept limits. We push against them. Sometimes they move. Sometimes they do not. But we always push. That is what we do. That is who we are. Lyra watched the garden grow. The plants grew faster than she expected. The humans cared for them, watered them, protected them from the sun. They did not give up. They did not accept that the desert could not grow food. They made it grow food. But the desert is still a desert, Lyra said. You have not changed the whole desert. Only a small part. The rest is still deadly. Elena nodded. That is true. We have not changed the whole desert. We have changed one garden. Tomorrow we will change another. The next day another. Slowly. Slowly. The desert will not become a forest overnight. But it will become less deadly. One garden at a time. One well at a time. One seed at a time. That is how we change reality. Not all at once. Little by little. Step by step. Push by push. Lyra did not understand. She had been taught that adaptation was quick. You changed yourself. You survived. You moved on. You did not stay in one place and fight the same battle for years. That was inefficient. That was wasteful. That was human. She stayed with the humans for a month. She watched them dig more wells, plant more gardens, build more shelters. She watched them fail. Seeds did not grow. Wells went dry. Storms destroyed shelters. The humans did not give up. They tried again. Different seeds. Deeper wells. Stronger shelters. They learned. They adapted. Not themselves. Their methods. Their tools. Their world. They are not adapting, Lyra said to herself. They are learning. They are growing. They are changing the world. They are not accepting limits. They are pushing against them. And sometimes, the limits move. She returned to the council. She presented her report. Humans do not adapt, she said. They transform. They change their environment to fit them. They do not accept limits. They push against them. Sometimes they fail. But they always try again. They are not stronger than us. Not smarter. Not faster. Just more stubborn. Just more hopeful. Just more human. The council was silent. They had tested humans with a desert. They had expected death or adaptation. They had gotten something else. Transformation. Change. Refusal to accept limits. The humans had not become desert creatures. They had made the desert less deadly. They had pushed against reality. And reality had moved. Just a little. But it had moved. The council created a new category. Not adapters. Transformers. The category meant one thing. They do not accept limits. They push against them. Sometimes the limits move. That is not adaptation. That is something else. That is human. And that, the council finally understood, was the most powerful force in the universe. Not acceptance. Not adaptation. Transformation. Change. Hope. The refusal to accept that things cannot be better. The refusal to accept that limits are final. The refusal to accept reality as it is. That is human. That is power. That is the first improbability. And it was only the beginning. The council tested humans again. The first test had been the desert. Humans had refused to accept the limits of their environment. They had changed the desert. They had planted gardens in the sand. They had found water underground. They had pushed against reality, and reality had moved. Now the council wanted to test something else. Something deeper. Something that every species accepted as unchangeable. Sickness. Every species got sick. Every species had diseases that killed them. Every species accepted this as a fact of life. You got sick. You suffered. You died. That was reality. That was the law. That was the way of the universe. Some species developed immunity over generations. The weak died. The strong survived. That was adaptation. That was evolution. That was reality. The council wanted to see if humans would accept this reality. So they exposed a human village to a deadly disease. A disease that killed quickly. A disease that had no known cure. The council expected the humans to die, or to develop immunity over many generations. They expected adaptation. They expected acceptance. They expected reality to win. The humans did not accept. The first people got sick. They died. The humans buried them. They mourned. They did not give up. They studied the disease. They had no microscopes, no laboratories, no medicines. They had their eyes, their hands, their minds. They watched the sick. They watched the dying. They watched the dead. They noticed patterns. The disease spread through water. People who drank from the same well got sick. People who drank from another well did not. The humans stopped drinking from the contaminated well. They dug a new well. The sickness slowed. It did not stop, but it slowed. The council watched. They are adapting, they said. They are changing their behavior. That is adaptation. But the humans did not stop. They wanted to understand the disease. Not just avoid it. They wanted to cure it. They collected plants. They tested them. One plant seemed to help. People who ate it got less sick. The humans tested the plant again and again. They fed it to the sick. Some got better. Some did not. But more got better than before. The humans kept testing, kept learning, kept trying. They found other plants. They mixed them together. They made a medicine. Not a perfect medicine. Not a cure for everyone. But a medicine that helped. A medicine that saved lives. The council was stunned. How did you do that? They asked. A human scientist looked at them. Her name was Maya. She was young. Her eyes were tired. She had lost friends to the disease. She had also saved many. She was not a hero. She was just someone who refused to accept that people had to die. We refused to accept that people had to die, she said. So we found another way. The council was silent. Every other species would have waited for generations. They would have let the weak die. They would have let the strong survive. That was adaptation. That was evolution. That was reality. But humans did not wait. They did not let the weak die. They fought. They studied. They learned. They found a cure. Not in generations. In months. But that is not how sickness works, said a xyloscientist. Disease is a fact of life. You cannot cure it. You can only survive it. The weak die. The strong live. That is the law. Maya shook her head. That is your law. Not ours. We do not accept that the weak must die. We help them. We carry them. We find ways to save them. Not because it is efficient. Because it is right. Because they are human. Because we are human. The Vel representative spoke. He was old. He had seen many plagues. He had watched many species die. He had watched the strong survive and the weak perish. That was the way of the universe. That was reality. You cannot cheat death, he said. Everyone dies eventually. Your medicine only delays the inevitable. Maya nodded. That is true. Everyone dies. But not everyone has to die today. Not everyone has to die from this disease. We can save some. We can save many. We can save most. That is not cheating death. That is fighting it. That is delaying it. That is giving people more time. More time to love. More time to laugh. More time to live. That is not nothing. That is everything. The Vel elder was silent. He had never thought of medicine as a way to give more time. He had always seen death as inevitable, unchangeable, reality. But the humans did not see it that way. They saw death as an enemy they could fight, an enemy they could delay, an enemy they could sometimes defeat. The council sent more scientists to observe. They watched the humans develop more medicines, vaccines, treatments, cures. They watched humans wipe out diseases that had killed millions. They watched humans extend their lifespans. They watched humans refuse to accept that sickness had to win. The scientists returned to the council. They presented their findings. Humans do not accept sickness, they said. They fight it. They study it. They find ways to defeat it. Not perfectly. Not always. But often enough. Often enough to save millions. Often enough to change reality. The council was silent. They had tested humans with a desert. Humans had changed the desert. They had tested humans with a disease. Humans had cured the disease. They had pushed against reality again. And reality had moved again. Not completely. But enough. Enough to matter. Enough to save lives. Enough to change the universe. The council created a new understanding. Humans do not accept limits. They push against them. They do not accept sickness. They fight it. They do not accept death. They delay it. They are not stronger than other species. Not smarter. Not faster. Just more stubborn. Just more hopeful. Just more human. And that, the council finally understood, was the most powerful force in the universe. Not acceptance. Not adaptation. Resistance. Hope. The refusal to accept that things cannot be better. That is human. That is power. That is the second improbability. And it was only the beginning. The council tested humans again. The first test had been the desert. Humans had refused to accept the limits of their environment. They had changed the desert. They had planted gardens in the sand. They had found water underground. The second test had been disease. Humans had refused to accept that sickness was inevitable. They had found cures. They had saved lives. They had pushed against reality, and reality had moved. Now the council wanted to test something bigger. Something that every species accepted as absolute. Distance. The galaxy was vast. Huge. Almost infinite. Travel between stars took years. Even with the fastest ships. Distance was a fact. A limit. A wall. Every species accepted this. You could not cross the galaxy in a day. You could not travel between planets in an hour. That was reality. That was the law. That was the way of the universe. The council wanted to see if humans would accept this reality. So they stranded a group of humans on a distant moon. No ship. No fuel. No way to call for help. The moon was barren. Rocks. Dust. Nothing else. The nearest inhabited planet was millions of miles away. Every other species would have waited for rescue or died. That was acceptance. That was reality. The humans did not accept. They looked at the moon. They looked at the rocks. They looked at the sky. They did not wait. They did not die. They built a ship. From scraps. From rocks. From nothing. They melted metal from ore. They shaped it with tools they made from stone. They built engines from salvaged parts. They calculated trajectories with math scratched into dust. They solved problems that should have been impossible. They worked for months. They did not give up. They did not stop. They did not accept that they could not go home. The council watched. They were confused. This is impossible, they said. They have no resources. No technology. No training. They cannot build a ship from nothing. But the humans kept working. They failed. Their first engine exploded. Their second engine would not start. Their third engine worked. For a few seconds. Then it died. They kept trying. Kept learning. Kept improving. They did not accept failure. They did not accept that distance was a wall. They pushed against it. And slowly, the wall moved. After 11 months, the humans had a ship. It was small. Ugly. Fragile. It should not have worked. But it worked. They climbed inside. They launched. They flew through space. They navigated by the stars. They calculated their course by hand. They traveled for days. Weeks. They did not give up. They did not turn back. They reached the inhabited planet. They landed. They stepped out. They were alive. They were home. The council was speechless. They had never seen anything like it. No other species would have tried. No other species could have succeeded. The humans had done the impossible. Not because they were stronger. Not because they were smarter. Not because they were faster. Because they refused to accept that distance could not be crossed. Because they refused to accept that impossible meant cannot. Because they were human. The council sent a scientist to interview the humans. Her name was Lyra. She had observed the first 2 tests. She had seen humans change deserts and cure diseases. She thought she understood them. She was wrong. She found the human engineer who had built the ship. His name was Kale. He was young. His hands were burned. His eyes were tired. He was smiling. How did you do it? Lyra asked. You had nothing. No resources. No technology. No training. You built a ship from rocks and scraps. That should have been impossible. Kale shrugged. Impossible is just a word. It means hasn't been done yet. We are very good at doing things that haven't been done yet. Lyra was silent. She had heard this before. From other humans. About other impossibilities. She was beginning to understand. Humans did not accept the word impossible. They did not accept that some things could not be done. They tried. They failed. They learned. They tried again. They did not stop. They did not give up. They did not accept reality as a prison. But the distance, Lyra said. The distance between the moon and the planet was millions of miles. No ship can cross that distance without fuel, without navigation, without years of preparation. You had none of these things. Kale nodded. We had rocks. We had scraps. We had our minds. That was enough. We made fuel from moon rocks. We made navigation from the stars. We made preparation from failure. We did not have what we needed, so we made what we needed. That is what humans do. We do not accept that we cannot have something. We make it. We build it. We create it. That is our way. Lyra returned to the council. She presented her report. Humans do not accept distance, she said. They do not accept that some places are too far to reach. They do not accept that some things are impossible. They try. They fail. They learn. They try again. They do not stop. They build ships from rocks. They cross distances that should not be crossed. They do the impossible. Not because they are magic. Because they are stubborn. Because they are hopeful. Because they are human. The council was silent. They had tested humans with a desert. Humans had changed the desert. They had tested humans with disease. Humans had cured the disease. They had tested humans with distance. Humans had crossed the distance. They had pushed against reality again. And again, reality had moved. The council created a new understanding. Humans do not accept limits. They push against them. They do not accept sickness. They fight it. They do not accept distance. They cross it. They do not accept impossibility. They do it. They are not stronger than other species. Not smarter. Not faster. Just more stubborn. Just more hopeful. Just more human. And that, the council finally understood, was the most powerful force in the universe. Not acceptance. Not adaptation. Resistance. Hope. The refusal to accept that things cannot be better. That is human. That is power. That is the third improbability. And it was only the beginning. The desert. The disease. The distance. Humans had changed them all. Not by magic. By work. By hope. By refusing to give up. That was their secret. That was their strength. That was their humanity. And the galaxy would never be the same. Because humans had shown them that reality was not a prison. It was a starting point. And they were just getting started. The council realized something. It had been watching humans for years. It had seen them change deserts into gardens, cure diseases that should have been fatal, cross distances that should have been impossible. The council had started with questions. Now it had an answer. Humans did not accept reality. They changed it. They looked at hunger and saw food. They did not accept that people had to starve. They grew crops in poor soil. They irrigated deserts. They created abundance where there was nothing. They looked at sickness and saw health. They did not accept that people had to die. They studied diseases. They found cures. They created medicines. They saved lives. They looked at distance and saw connection. They did not accept that some places were too far to reach. They built ships. They crossed oceans. They traveled to the moon. They reached for the stars. They looked at war and saw peace. They did not accept that enemies had to fight. They talked. They listened. They shared bread. They asked about families. They built bridges where there had been walls. The galaxy began to learn. The Kritha had always accepted that strength was everything. Power was the only truth. The strong conquered. The weak submitted. That was reality. But they watched humans. Humans were not the strongest. Yet they survived. They thrived. They changed things. The Kritha began to question. Was strength really everything? They started building communities instead of armies. They started helping instead of conquering. They started sharing instead of taking. It was hard. They made mistakes. But they kept trying. They kept changing. The Xylos had always accepted that logic was enough. Reason was the only truth. The smart led. The ignorant followed. That was reality. But they watched humans. Humans were not the smartest. Yet they solved problems the Xylos could not. They created art. They wrote poetry. They loved without reason. The Xylos began to question. Was logic really enough? They started feeling emotions instead of analyzing them. They started experiencing life instead of studying it. They started loving without needing a reason. It was hard. They made mistakes. But they kept trying. They kept changing. The Vel had always accepted that time was a cage. The past was fixed. The future was uncertain. That was reality. But they watched humans. Humans had short lives. Yet they lived fully. They loved deeply. They changed quickly. They did not wait for the perfect moment. They made their own moments. The Vel began to question. Was time really a cage? They started living in the present instead of waiting for the future. They started making changes instead of preserving the past. They started growing instead of staying still. It was hard. They made mistakes. But they kept trying. They kept changing. The Orathai had always accepted that change was survival. Adaptation was the only truth. The flexible lived. The rigid died. That was reality. But they watched humans. Humans did not adapt to their environment. They changed their environment to fit them. They reshaped forests into farms, deserts into cities, mountains into mines. The Orathai began to question. Was adaptation really survival? They started shaping their world instead of adapting to it. They started growing instead of just changing. They started being instead of just becoming. It was hard. They made mistakes. But they kept trying. They kept changing. The final scene takes place at the council headquarters. The building was old, ancient. It had seen millions of years of history. The walls were carved with the old mottos. Strength through power. Logic through reason. Time through patience. Change through adaptation. These mottos had been true for millions of years. They were no longer true. The old mottos were gone, chiseled away. In their place, a new motto, carved deep into the stone. Simple, clear, human. Reality is not a prison. It is a starting point. A human woman sits at the council table. She is old. Her hair is white. Her hands are rough. Her name is Elena. She is a farmer. She has spent her life growing food. She has spent her life changing reality. Small changes. One garden at a time. One well at a time. One seed at a time. But changes. She is eating bread. Fresh bread. Baked this morning. She breaks it. She shares it with the beings around her. Kritha. Xylos. Vel. Orathai. They take the bread. They eat. They are not enemies. Not rivals. Not strangers. They are neighbors. They are friends. They are becoming. You asked why we change reality, Elena says. Her voice is soft. But the room is quiet. Everyone listens. Because reality is not done. Neither are we. We are all becoming. That is the only truth that matters. Not strength. Not logic. Not time. Not adaptation. Becoming. Growing. Changing. Improving. That is what we do. That is who we are. That is what the galaxy can be. The Kritha general speaks. He was once her enemy. He once led an invasion. Now he is her neighbor. We have learned so much from you, he says. But we have so much more to learn. Elena smiles. We all do. That is the point. Learning never ends. Growing never stops. Becoming never finishes. That is not a flaw. That is a feature. That is what makes life worth living. That is what makes reality worth changing. The Xylos scientist speaks. She was once confused by human emotion. Now she feels it. What is the next reality you will change? She asks. Elena thinks for a moment. She looks out the window. The stars are bright. The galaxy is vast. There is so much work to do. Everything, she says. We will change everything. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But we will try. We will fail. We will learn. We will try again. That is our way. That is human. That is becoming. And becoming, we have learned, is the only thing that has ever saved anyone. The only thing that ever will. The council is silent. They do not fully understand. But they are beginning to. Reality is not a prison. It is a starting point. Humans are not finished. They are becoming. And becoming, they have learned, is the most powerful force in the universe. Not as subjects. As partners. As neighbors. As friends. As becoming. And that, they finally understand, is the only thing that matters. The only thing that is real. The only thing that lasts. Becoming. Always becoming. Never done. Never finished. Never perfect. But always better. Always human. Always enough. Always everything.